John Barry, thank you very much for joining us. And you spent about 10 years active duty in the United States Navy as a surgeon, I think, if I have that right. And first, just to get us started, when did you go into the Navy, and why did you go into the Navy?
Well, I was looking for a way to get my medical school paid for. I had been accepted to medical school at the University of Oklahoma, and I started there in August of '89. It didn't take me long to figure out that it was going to be a little bit on the expensive side.
Yeah,
coming from just a middle class family, and so I know several of my classmates were on scholarship programs through the military, the Health Profession Scholarship Program. And so I had decided to apply for that program and applied through the Navy and got accepted.
okay.
I think that was around the fall of '89.
About the fall of '89.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And why the Navy? Why not Army, Air Force?
Well, I was trying to decide between the Navy and the Army.
Okay.
And that year I decided whichever team won the Army-Navy game was who I was going with.
Okay.
So it just so happened that the Navy won that year, and that was it.
All right. So no stories of, my grandfather was an admiral and, family tradition.
No big family history. I had one of my great uncles was in the Navy, and it was on a boat over off the coast.
Yeah.
And his boat ended up sinking, got sunk, and they had to rescue him out of the water and all that. But that's about the only military history in the family.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you do have some. So you're accepted in '89. When do you actually get your commission?
Well, I was commissioned after accepting the program.
Yeah.
And we got commissioned at the Murrah Federal Building there in Oklahoma City.
And
that's where the MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station, was across the street, where they did all the physical exams and all that. But the recruiting office for the Navy was in the Murrah Building there. And and then I was.
I'm sorry if I can interrupt just real quick. That's the building that 5 years later, was it about 5 years later when the bombing took place there in Oklahoma City?
I think it was 95, 96. I can't remember exactly sure, but it was around there.
But that's the spot.
That's the spot. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you got your commission in 1990.
Right, and then so we had to go to what's called Officer Indoctrination School as part of the Health Profession Scholarship Program. It was a 6-week program. It was in Newport, Rhode Island, and it was that summer of '90. And I remember my class was 9006 Alpha was our class.
Yeah.
I was in golf company. Anyway, we were there in the middle, kind of toward the end of our time at OIS, when Saddam Hussein invaded into Kuwait.
Yeah.
And I can remember our instructors kind of pulling our chains, saying, telling us, well, you may not get to go home and go back to medical school. We may end up having to keep you on active duty here and send you to the Gulf. But they were just trying to get a rise out of us, and of course they did.
So that didn't happen.
No.
I'll share this experience. I mean, when I went into the Navy, I wish I had a good reason. But really, after high school, I spent a year in a rock band trying to be a rock star. That didn't work out. I looked around, didn't see any other options, so I went in the Navy. But I was kind of so clueless I didn't even really associate the Navy with war. It wasn't until like halfway through boot camp that it actually dawned on me that if the country went to war, I could maybe be involved in it. That's how kind of clueless I was. But but you've got this military conflict that begins to take shape pretty quickly after you get your commission. Did that kind of make military service a little more real to you? That, oh wow, okay, this is for real. I mean, maybe I will get shipped off to the Gulf.
Yeah, I think it really did. And I can remember my routine after the war got started. I would go to class during the day, go home in the evening, sit at the kitchen table, have dinner, turn the TV on, watch the planes take off, watch the bombings happen while I was eating dinner.
Yeah.
And then turn the TV off, go study, and kind of do the same thing the next day.
Yeah. Were you glad not to be in it, or was there a little part of you that wished you were in it?
I think there was a little part that kind of, wished I would have, been able to be in some of that. Most of my time on active duty was kind of in between the two Gulf Wars. So I was never really had to serve under fire or under active hostilities. There was kind of always the threat of these things. And certainly I knew plenty of people that were either before me or after me that did, serve time during, active hostilities and in a dangerous environment.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if I remember correctly, when you go into the Navy as a medical officer, you go right when you go to active duty. You're an 03 right off the bat. Is that right? You start as
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You start off as a captain.
Start off as a lieutenant. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Yeah, lieutenant. I'm sorry. I'm thinking Army. Yeah, right. And getting my ranks mixed up. Yeah, that's right. 03 lieutenant. So what did your what basic job did you have then within the Naval Medical Services?
Well, once I finished medical school, I went to University of Texas and did a general surgery internship. The Navy gave me a 1-year deferment to do a general an internship. So I did that in Houston. Yeah. And then I went on active duty and was assigned to a Marine Corps infantry unit at Camp Pendleton, California, is what we call a general medical officer. Basically doing primary care kind of medicine for the Marines that I was stationed with. That was 1st Battalion, 1st Marines at the Camp Pendleton.
Yeah. And I think, I was peacetime Navy, but I don't, of course, when folks think of the military and they think of injuries in the military and even deaths in the military, of course, they think war related. But there are a lot of training related injuries and all sorts of problems. I was on an aircraft carrier, pretty dangerous context. What kinds of injuries did you see that came as a result of training? You're with these Marines, so I imagine you've got a lot of enlisted Marines coming your way. What sort of stuff did you see?
Well, when I was a general medical officer, a lot of it was musculoskeletal type of issues. Skin problems, bad blisters on the feet, stress fractures in the feet. My knees hurt, my back hurts, that kind of stuff, because it was an infantry unit, so we were always out on the march, on the go. So a lot of musculoskeletal types of injuries and things when I was a general medical officer.
These are Marines jumping out of helicopters and things like that, and
twisting ankles and that kind of stuff. Quite a bit of that.
Did you actually go out into the field with them?
Oh yeah, wherever they went and whatever they did, I was right along with them as the medical officer.
Wow. Did you ever have that thought, like, I joined the Navy and this wasn't what I had in mind? that time?
No, it was quite an adventure, and I really enjoyed my time. And the Marines were a really a unique group of individuals, and very focused and very driven. And I really enjoyed. And most of my time was probably most of my real active duty time, besides my training days, were mainly spent with the Marines on the green side.
Wow. Yeah. In your 10 years, where did you go? I tell students, if they want to travel and don't want to pay for it in terms of having to buy their own airline tickets, the Navy is a great way to have a good chance to see a lot of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Where did you go in your 10 years with the Navy?
Well, while I was General Medical Officer there with the Marines, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, we went on a Westpac deployment. We deployed on the Peleliu, the USS Peleliu, LHA-5, and we had it was part of the 15th MU Special Operations Capable, and so we deployed to the Western Pacific, and we spent about I guess it was 6 weeks in the desert in Kuwait. Really? Training. And of course we hit lots of on the way there and the way back we hit several Liberty ports, Hong Kong, Manila, Thailand, Qatar, Oman.
Wow.
And then we landed in Kuwait. Like I said, we did about 6 weeks out in the desert doing training. And it was, so the first the Gulf War had already kind of ended, the hostilities had ended, but there was still a lot of, debris, military trucks and whatnot pushed off to the sides of the roads and kind of piled up. And the places where we would stay on the sidewalks when we were still in Kuwait City, before we went out into the desert.
Yeah.
You could see, on the sidewalks, little marks where the little bomblets, had hit.
Yeah.
And so there was still a lot of evidence of what had happened there.
So
right before.
Yeah. So in Kuwait, you could still see some of the aftermath of that.
Yeah.
Of Hussein's invasion, and then of the struggle that followed. Tell me about a Marine Westpac. Being with the Marines on a Westpac, Navy. So I did 2 Westpacs on an aircraft carrier. So that means we spent a lot of time doing circles out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. But it sounds like a Marine Westpac is kind of going from port to port to port, just kind of doing training in different environments.
Well, yeah, exactly. We our big training time that we spent was in Kuwait in the desert.
Yeah.
But we also did some smaller maneuvers. I remember we did like a little 2 or 3 day exercise in Qatar with them.
Yeah.
A lot of it is, it's just the transit over there and transit back. But there's certain, and of course also while we were out at sea, since we had, SEALs were embarked with us on the ships and stuff. Oh. They practiced, maritime interdiction, raids and some stuff like that out at sea as well. But the big thing for the Marines, were the landings and setting up stuff out in the desert.
Yeah. So you had SEALs on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're getting anything secret, then we don't have to talk about it.
No.
You had SEAls on the ship, and would they like get on like the smaller boats and then head out and practice, or really that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and there were a lot of we had helicopters and Harrier jets, out on the ship as well, and so a lot of nighttime flight ops and things like that. And I can remember my stateroom was right under one of the landing spots.
Oh yeah.
And so I had the top bunk, and there was about 3 feet of steel between us and the flight deck.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Harriers especially would come down and they would land, you could kind of feel the heat coming through the ceiling. Of course, you couldn't hear yourself think, it was so loud.
Yeah, well, I know exactly what you're talking about. My berthing was right under, I think, the first level down on the aircraft carrier, and the planes are just landing, and
Hmm.
somehow you get used to it. So some of the stuff you're dealing with is you've got Marines, going on 10-mile hikes and their knees hurting and these sorts of problems. Um, a less serious question, but as you know from all this traveling you do with the Navy, ports are different. So did you ever go to Singapore?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so you remember Singapore. Singapore's, I don't know what they did with you, but before we pulled into Singapore, they gave us a list and they said if you spit, then if you spit, you get caught spitting, you'll get hit so many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you get caught chewing gum, and it was nice to get off the boat, but it seemed a little uptight. Then there are other ports where basically you're told don't kill anybody, and we'll see you. We'll see you in a few days. Kind of these.
And try not to get killed yourself.
Try not to get killed. Some of these wild ports. As a doctor, did you have to deal with some of the aftermath of things that happened in some of the wild ports?
Not too much. Most of it would be, service members that came back had maybe overindulged a little bit,
Right.
and maybe a little on the drunk side and belligerent, and so they would have to be watched in the medical space. And usually, what we would do would be to have somebody from their work department come down there and babysit them.
Yeah.
So then the next time they had Liberty Port, there was a little peer pressure to maybe not overindulge as much as they had.
All right. So you didn't have any guys get hit by buses or anything like that when they're stumbling down the street, or?
Well, there were some people that got injured, and we had a service member fall onto a garbage scow off the side of the ship and
Ooh.
had a head injury, and it was in one of the host nation's hospitals. And so sometimes that stuff, would happen occasionally.
Yeah.
Or somebody involved in an accident in town, most of the time they were prohibited from, getting on motorbikes and things like that. But not everybody always followed the rules, and occasionally somebody would be involved in an accident and end up in a local hospital.
Yeah. I forget, what are those things called in the water? The jet skis.
Mm-hmm.
When we went into Pattaya, they told us not to rent jet skis, and I think within 3 hours I was on a jet ski out in that kind of stupid stuff. But of course, the vast majority of the sailors and the Marines, keep things within bounds, and so
Sure.
It's those unique cases that stick out, but most of the time it's fine. What for you? What did you enjoy most about your 10 years in the Navy, and what was the part about it that you would have let go of if you could have?
I think one of the things that I really liked the most was just the travel and seeing other countries. And once I finished my 2-year stint as a medical officer with the Marines, I came back to the States, and I'd finished my general surgery training at the Naval Hospital in San Diego. And then I had the opportunity to deploy overseas with my family. And so we went to Okinawa, Japan.
Yeah.
And I was a general surgeon at the hospital there on Camp Lester, Okinawa, for 2 years. And so we got to really, live in a different culture. My family was with me. My kids were both young. And so it was, I think it was a real great experience. It gives you a lot of new perspective. You see things, you kind of see what it's like to live in a foreign country where you're different than everybody else, and you may not speak the language or be able to read all the street signs, and you have a little bit of empathy for how people feel sometimes when they're here and they're in that situation.
I think that's right. Yeah. Did you live off base in Okinawa or on base?
We lived on base.
Lived on base, but you'd go out enough to see the world.
Oh yeah.
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 How would you describe? Because every once in a while we get news, about some of the locals on Okinawa, and tensions with the bases. On the whole, how would you describe the relationship between the base and the local population there in Okinawa in the 1990s?
I think the vast majority of the people were very supportive of the base and the military presence there. A lot of people either had economic ties to the base where they had jobs, they were employed. We had some, Okinawans that we even worked in the general surgery clinic and within the hospital.
Yeah.
A lot of people had housekeepers, or what everybody called a mama-san.
Yeah.
And a lot of these folks had done it for many years and kept track of their families. And we had a lady that would come to our house, and she loved Americans. She was a small child during the occupation when the Japanese had occupied Okinawa and forced a lot of the Okinawans into slave labor, building runways, etc.
Wow.
And so her family was always told that, bad things were happening when the Americans came in, that they, landed on the island. And so she told a story about they were up in the northern part of the island when the battle for Okinawa was going on.
Wow.
And some Americans came across them in the jungle, and they were very fearful, and they thought, well, this is it. All the bad stuff that we've been told that's going to happen is about to happen.
Yeah.
And she said, and she remembers then the Americans started giving them food and candy bars.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, they were just totally shocked, that people were being so nice to them.
Yeah.
So she had a deep love for Americans, and so that was a really neat experience.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool. What would you say to young folks today who are thinking about serving in the military? I mean, I asked a minute ago, about the good, and you mentioned the travel, and I mean, with most jobs, there's at least one thing that you kind of don't like, and so that's probably, I don't know, inevitable, but most jobs have something you don't like. So, but what would you say to a young person who's thinking about, going in the service? What's the benefit of doing it as you look back on that 10 years in your own experience?
Well, I think it's a great experience, a great opportunity to see the world, to develop some skills that you may not be able to develop anywhere else, leadership skills. And of course, now I think it's a lot different nowadays than I had pretty good timing. I was kind of in between the Gulf Wars.
Yeah.
I was never really on active duty any place where somebody really was out trying to kill me.
Yeah.
Certainly, it seems to be a little bit different, environment now than what it was. I think those things are a little more real now, and certainly a lot more people are serving in harm's way. And I guess that's something that you always have to balance into the equation. But I think it is a great opportunity, especially for somebody who, may exactly, not know exactly what it is that they want to do with their lives. Can give them some time and some experiences and opportunities.
I agree with that 100%. And this skill, I mean, that you picked up in the Navy, or that the Navy made it possible for you to pick up as a surgeon, I'm guessing from what you're wearing that you're still at it.
Yeah, I'm still a general surgeon, and my training being in the military, there was a large emphasis on trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we took care of retirees and dependents, and did all kinds of general surgery, operations and stuff, taking care of those people. But our main focus is when bullets go down range. We're there to, take care of the active duty guys who get hurt. So trauma was always a big part of my training, and I kind of have really enjoyed that aspect of it. And even here in my civilian practice, trauma is a big part of what we do.
Wow.
I was the trauma medical director at the Washington Regional for quite a few years, 6 or 7 years, before I turned it over to somebody else. But still has a big part of my practice. In fact, I was in the hospital last night at 2:00 in the morning taking care of somebody who had a gunshot wound. So
who had gotten shot?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Gee whiz. Washington Regional in what state?
Here, Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Oh, right, in Northwest Arkansas here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, so, I mean, I was on the enlisted side, did very different work in the Navy, and the work I did in the Navy, using radar on an aircraft carrier is not really translatable to very many skills in the civilian world. But still, generally what you're saying, I go along with completely, that the experiences, kind of the wake-up call of boot camp. If you're kind of directionless in life, boot camp can be a very helpful wake-up call. It's time to get on with things.
Reality hits you right in the face.
The travel, the experiences you have in the military that you're just not going to have anywhere else.
No.
I strongly encourage young folks to consider it.
Yeah, the friendships that you make.
Yeah, that's right, and just that sense of camaraderie. Well, John Barry, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your memories about your time in the Navy. Thanks a lot.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Great, thank you.